Russia, the bear. Russia is never far from dominating the news in one way or another. As to why, one needs to understand its nature. To understand the nature of Russia, it is noteworthy to consider its national symbol. Russia's national symbol is a bear. From the internet, Russia's national animal is a Eurasian brown bear. It has been a symbol of the country for centuries, appearing in maps, cartoons, and folklore. Russia is often referred to as the Bear Nation, or Russian bear. This image has been used to personify Russia since the 16th century and continues to be a prominent symbol, often representing the nation's strength and sometimes its more aggressive nature or imposing nature. The bear is also a significant part of Russian folklore and culture, appearing in various forms of entertainment and even being considered a national animal. The aggressive nature of a bear. A bear will never retreat from pursuing its prey unless it is confronted by something or someone greater. It is normally slow and ponderous, but can also move fast if the circumstances warrant it. Some people have been killed by bears not knowing how quickly they can act. Keep this in mind when viewing what they are now doing. From the internet, on February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, starting the largest and deadliest war in Europe since World War II. In a major escalation of the conflict between the two countries, which began in 2014. Russia began its war with Ukraine with the intent of bringing it back into the continued revival of the former Union of the Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR, which Vladimir Putin has in his mind to accomplish. And symbolizing a bear, he will not stop. This is ongoing in the news. President Trump, not understanding the nature of Vladimir Putin and the nation of Russia, is trying to be a peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine. But Russia demands it can only be on its terms. Therefore, the war continues and people die on both sides. Interestingly, each nation has its symbol, an animal or a fierce eagle that symbolizes its strength and sovereignty. Ukraine, from the internet. Before its official independence in 1991, Ukraine was known as Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, USSR. Prior to Soviet rule, parts of the territory were ruled by various entities, including Lithuania, Poland, and Russia. The Ukrainian coat of arms, trident, or trizub, has a long history over 1,000 years, if not more. But at the same time, it is a symbol of a modern country. July the 2nd, 2023, today the coat of arms, trident, is seen as a symbol of Ukrainian national identity, resembling the country's history and cultural heredity. The aggressive Russian bear. Recent news reveals the continued advance of Russia, the bear, toward Ukraine. From Fox News, 5/29/25, Putin masses 50,000 troops on Ukraine's north front as Trump again agrees to meet Russian-Ukrainian leaders. Story by Caitlin McPhail. Russian President Vladimir Putin has amassed some 50,000 troops on Ukraine's northern border, despite a united push by the U.S. and Ukraine to get Moscow to enter into meaningful ceasefire negotiations. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Wednesday warned that Putin is preparing a massive summer offensive in a move to push Ukraine's troops out of Russia's Kursk region and to launch a new invasion into Ukraine's Sumy region, a mere 200 miles from the capital city of Kiev. Zelensky reiterated this week that he is ready to hold direct negotiation with Putin and suggested that if the Kremlin chief is uncomfortable with a bilateral meeting, a trilateral meeting could be held with President Donald Trump. Heore Taikiya, a spokesman for Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said during a live check on X Thursday that since the May 16 meeting in Turkey, Russia had launched 120 missiles, more than 1,500 drones, and more than 2,500 guided bombs on Ukrainian cities. The movement of Russian troops comes as Putin looks to create a roughly 6-mile wide buffer zone, which Moscow reportedly has been attempting to carry out since 2024, but which was thwarted by Ukraine's Kursk invasion. Implementing a buffer zone on Ukraine's northern territory will likely be used as a bargaining chip if Moscow engages in ceasefire negotiations, which Kiev has said Russia has failed to do in good faith after delegations from both sides met in Istanbul earlier this month, but failed to advance peace talks. Russia late on Wednesday suggested a second Istanbul meeting where it said it would present its memorandum of ceasefire terms. Ukraine has thus far not accepted another meeting with Russia, and on Thursday said Moscow promises supply its memorandum ahead of any future talks. They were scared to share it because they filed the document with ultimatums and demands. Taikiya said Thursday they understand this document is needed not to advance the peace process but to stall. Ukraine has already submitted their ceasefire terms. Trump on Wednesday said he would meet with both world leaders if necessary, but the Kremlin again rejected the suggestion. The U.S. president said he was very disappointed at Russia's continued bombardment of Ukraine during negotiation attempts, but he has refused to hit Putin with more sanctions, telling reporters, "I think I'm close to getting a deal. I don't want to screw it up by doing that." Russia plays along with President Trump, but continues with its aggressive objectives. RBC, Ukraine. A Russian representative warns of war escalation at UN. Ukraine urges response. Story by Darian Velayko, 5/30/25, Russian representative to the UN, Vasily Nebenja, stated that Moscow is ready to continue and escalate military action to Ukraine for as long as it deems necessary. The bearer. The world must respond to Russia's position, according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Andriy Sybiha, during a UN Security Council meeting. Nebenja emphasized that the goals of this special military operation could be achieved either by military means or through peaceful negotiations. He said that Russia is ready to continue and step up military activities as long as necessary. Ukraine's reaction. Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha emphasized that while the whole world insists that it is time to immediately stop the killings and start meaningful diplomacy, Russia is using the highest diplomatic platforms to spew such bellicose rhetoric. This is Russia's slap in the face to all who advocate for peace, not just Ukraine, but also the United States, European countries, China, Brazil, and others, Sybiha added. He emphasized that Ukraine demands a response to Russia's bold statements which threaten the peace process. We insist that the pressure on Moscow be increased already now. They do not understand normal attitude or diplomatic language. It is time to speak to them in the language of sanctions and increased support for Ukraine, the minister concluded. It's worth noting that the UN Security Council convened this time specifically to address the situation in Ukraine. Yesterday, Sybiha revealed what Kiev expected from the meeting. Last week, Russia launched massive drone and missile attacks on Ukraine for 3 consecutive nights. U.S. President Donald Trump initially refrained from commenting on the strikes, but later said that Putin has gone absolutely crazy.
Not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him, but he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all.
Trump also stated that the United States is considering imposing sanctions against Russia. Meanwhile, the Kremlin responded to Trump's remarks by claiming the statement was due to the American president's emotional overload. Later, Trump again criticized Putin for stalling peace negotiations with Ukraine, warning Russia of really bad things. Moscow demands halting mobilization and military aid to Ukraine in exchange for ceasefire. Story by Eric Malachowski. Nebenja made the comments during a UN Security Council meeting, convened at Moscow's request. Russia accused European countries of attempting to hamper the peace process around Ukraine. He said that on a principled basis, Russia could consider a ceasefire, but for now, Ukraine must stop its mobilization, he added. If these conditions are not met, the diplomat threatened that Russia would continue and intensify military operations in Ukraine for as long as necessary. He also stated that Russia is dissatisfied with any arrangement that would allow Ukraine to catch its breath, lick its wounds, and stop the collapse of the Eastern Front. After Ukraine, then what? Does Russia have in mind to wage war with America? Does prophecy make known of such a war? If so, when? These will be answered from the prophecies of the Holy Bible. Background of Russia. Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, also known as the Soviet Union, was a transcontinental country that existed from 1922 to 1991. It was the first Marxist communist state formed after the Russian Revolution of 1917 and subsequent Civil War. The USSR was a federation of 15 republics, each with its own constitution, but the government and economy were highly centralized under the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The Supreme Soviet of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, SSUSSR, was the highest body of state authority of the Soviet Union, USSR, from 1936 to 1991. Ukraine officially declared its independence from the Soviet Union on August 24, 1991. This declaration was followed by a referendum on December 1, 1991, where 92.3% of voters supported independence. The Soviet Union formally dissolved on December 26, 1991. From the New York Times, 5/29/25, Trump said he was not happy with Putin. President Trump said today he was very disappointed that Russia, the bearer, had continued to drop bombs on Ukraine while the U.S. was trying to quickly broker a deal to end the war. However, Trump declined to suggest any potential consequences for the Kremlin. Instead, the president said that he would wait to see the results from negotiations over the next 2 weeks to establish whether President Vladimir Putin of Russia was stringing him along. Some of Trump's allies in Congress have urged him to impose new sanctions on Russia, but he said that he hadn't done so because he felt he was close to a deal to end the war in Ukraine. Trump also argued that his recent criticism of Putin, who he said had gone absolutely crazy over the weekend, spoke pretty loud. Putin prepares for a long war with NATO, ISW on Kremlin's plan. Story by Ola Valhan. Putin signed a decree on the requisition of defense enterprises during the war. SW, abbreviation for study of war, sees this as a preparation for a prolonged conflict with NATO, according to the Institute for the Study of War. On May 30, Vladimir Putin signed a decree allowing the government to take control of defense enterprises if factories fail to fulfill state orders during martial law. New powers were Kremlin. The document grants Russia's Ministry of Industry and Trade the authority to remove shareholders of defense companies and appoint management firms instead, if the enterprise does not meet the state defense order. Who decrees effects? The changes cover a wide range of enterprises, including, thus the government effectively gains full control over key economic sectors if mobilization becomes necessary. Full economic militarization as goal. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War, ISW, believes this decree is part of the Kremlin strategy for long-term militarization. It likely creates a legal basis to shift the Russian economy onto a war footing in case of full martial law. According to ISW, Putin is preparing not only for a prolonged war against Ukraine, but also leaves open the possibility of a larger conflict, including with NATO. No signs of readiness for peace. ISW emphasized that the Kremlin's actions show no willingness to conduct genuine negotiations to end the war. On the contrary, Russia is tightening internal control, preparing its population for a long conflict, and creating conditions for mobilizing its economy. How Russia prepares for a long war, this step complements other Kremlin actions aimed at strengthening the defense sector, increasing state orders, mobilizing reserves, repressing dissenters, and boosting war spending. Thus, Russia is increasingly entering a long-term conflict mode with no sign of stopping. Trump accused Putin of deliberately delaying peace talks with Ukraine and threatening Russia with really bad things. The U.S. leader said that Vladimir Putin didn't realize that without his involvement, very serious and bad things would have already happened to Russia, and that Putin was playing with fire. Commenting on recent massive attacks against Ukraine, Trump also stated that the U.S. is considering sanctions against Russia. Russia will win its war with Ukraine, though not right away. However, the prophecy of Armageddon makes known Ukraine will lose its war with Russia and return to its mother country. In the interim, the war of words. The independent former Russian president threatens Trump with World War III after Putin criticism. Story by Tom Whaling, 5/28/25. The U.S. branded the comments by the often inflammatory Dmitry Medvedev reckless as the war of the words between the two global powers continues to ramp up. However, diplomatic efforts appear to be ongoing despite the public clashes, and in a rare move, U.S. embassy officials were seen attending a security meeting in Moscow on Wednesday. The latest tit-for-tat began at the weekend when Trump called the Russian leader crazy following an airstrike on Kiev. He doubled down on the criticism on Tuesday in a post on Truth Social and, quote, what Vladimir Putin doesn't realize is that if it weren't for me, lots of really bad things would have already happened to Russia, and I mean really bad. He's playing with fire. The Russian bear will not stop unless it is confronted with a nation its equal and making known it means business with force if necessary. Medvedev, who served as Russian president from 2008 and 2012 and now a top security official, flipped Trump's remarks, writing, I only know one really bad thing, World War III. I hope Trump understands this. Stoking fears of World War III is an unfortunate, reckless comment by Medvedev and unfitting of a world power, he wrote on X. President Trump POTUS is working to stop this war and end the killing. We await receipt of the RU memorandum, the term sheet that you promised a week ago. Ceasefire now. The sighting of 2 U.S. officials from the embassy in Moscow at an international security forum in the Russian capital is notable, as it marks the first time an American delegation has attended such an event since before Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Counselor for Political and Economic Affairs Eric Jordan and Second Secretary Jeremy Ventuso were both seen at the international meeting of high representatives for security issues. The Russian leader opened up the event saying that Moscow's approach to security, which includes its war in Ukraine, remains fundamental and unchanged. Remember, Russia, the aggressive bear. The move was likely a low-cost goodwill gesture, signaling the Trump administration's continued desire to normalize relations with Moscow, says Sam Green, professor in Russian politics at King's College, London. For Moscow, he added, the invitation is the latest attempt to signal supposed seriousness about talks with the U.S. without actually giving anything up. Just a day earlier, after Trump's initial comments about Putin becoming crazy, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov suggested the U.S. leader was a man who wants results but had got emotional. He added that Europe was trying to sabotage the efforts of Russia and the U.S. to broker peace, a reference to efforts to sanction Moscow for refusing to agree to a truce in Ukraine. President Trump is a man who wants the results, Lavrov said at a press conference with his Turkish counterpart, Hakan Fidan. He sees some of the Europeans are working to sabotage his efforts for a peace settlement, pushing Ukraine to absolutely reckless actions. Of course, he gets emotional, and of course, as someone who does not like anything to stand in the way of his noble goals, he looks at it a certain way, shifts rhetoric. The most important thing is not to focus on mere rhetoric, but rather to ensure that Europe stops sabotaging our peace plans, which are supporting both the U.S. and Turkey, and to which Russia is fully committed, the bear. Russian state media has subsequently played down Trump's latest comments, highlighting that the U.S. president is yet to take any action against Moscow despite his recent warnings. Dmitry Dries, a Russian political commentator for Kommersant, described Trump's latest comments as a skirmish across the ocean. From beautiful phrases about wonderful negotiations about the fact that a breakthrough on the path to peace is about to happen, Donald Trump has moved on, to threats, or rather, to reproaches. You can also call it an exchange of pleasantries, a skirmish across the ocean. Nevertheless, nothing terrible has happened yet. So now the question is whether America will follow Europe in raising the stakes or, as before, limit itself to beautiful praises and reproaches. Warfare between America and Russia. Will the war of words lead to actual warfare between those two world powers, Russia and America? Many leaders and people on both sides and other nations are fearful it would, for they realize the world would be set on fire due to the use of nuclear bombs. They also know if this should happen, it would involve other nations in the conflict who also have nuclear bombs. World War III. What does the Holy Bible reveal about the possibility, or does it say anything at all about a war between Russia and America? When studying the prophecies, there is no mention of such a war between these two world powers. If it were to be a war, it would be mentioned as other wars are mentioned with smaller nations in the prophecies of the Bible. In the interim, the bear will continue its war with Ukraine. After winning the war, which it will, then it will turn to attention to other former nations of the Soviet Republic. That is the nature of a bear before it hibernates for the winter, meaning a brief pause before it awakens with hunger and seeks to devour other former nations of the Republic. bringing her children back to their mother, Russia. These former nations realized this as a real threat to their sovereignty. The 15 former Soviet nations, also known as post-Soviet states, are the independent countries that emerged from the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. These states are Internet. Yes, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. Specifically, it was the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, UKRSSR, one of the 15 constituent republics of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR. The Ukrainian SSR was a founding member of the USSR in 1922. Ukraine declared its independence and became recognized as an independent state in December 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. Fear from bordering countries, leaders and their peoples of bordering states are fearful they might be next on Russia's list to be attacked and become member states of the Soviet Republic. Russia borders 14 countries. It is already waging war with Ukraine, the first on its list. Considering their proximity to Russia, the 14 countries know in time they will also have the bearer seeking to devour them as well, Armageddon. The last war to be fought in this age will be that of Armageddon. And to make it possible for Russia and its 200 million armies, the unseen Satan the devil will sway. Revelation 20, verses 7 and 8. Satan will go out to deceive the nations. Gog constitutes a people, and Magog the land of Gog, to gather them together to battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. The member nations with Russia are as follows. Ezekiel 38, verses 1 and 2. Now the word of the Eternal came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face against Gog, constitutes a people, Gog does, Mongoloid, of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, White Russians, Meshech, meaning Moscow, and Tobu, Great Russians. Persia means Iran, Ethiopia, and Libya, and Togarmah. Prophecy makes known the way has been prepared for them. The Euphrates River, having been dried up, and advanced to the valley of Jehoshaphat for their final struggle in the battle to determine supreme rulership over all nations. Revelation 16, verses 12 through 16. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its waters was dried up, so that the way of the kings from the east might be prepared. And I saw 3 unclean spirits go out to the kings of the earth to gather them to the place called Armageddon. An all-out war will then take place between the 2 major nations at that time, Russia and Europe. With the possible exceptions of Norway and Finland, who are of the 12 tribes of Israel, all the other nations will have returned or brought back to Russia, along with other nations who will be with Russia, including Ukraine. All will be in this upcoming battle called Armageddon. Immediately after that will be the coming of Jesus Christ back to this earth. It will be at this precise moment in time that Christ will return from heaven to this earth, thus saving humanity from the nuclear bomb that will destroy all humanity. Jesus Christ will intervene in that battle and begin his iron rule over all mankind. Not immediately taking place, it will take possibly 50 years before all will come to be at peace with each other while being ruled by Jesus Christ. Thy kingdom come. If you found this content helpful, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more videos like this. And don't forget to enable notifications so you're always up to date. Thanks for your support.